What's up, guys? Matthew here. I'm back with another board game review. Last time we looked at Bonanza, and it's all about them bean farming, huh? Today we're gonna look at a classic. Now, it's not your average classic. We're not talking about no Monopoly, sorry, Battleship, but we're talking about Munchkin by Steve Jackson. Now, as soon as you hear the word Munchkin, you think to yourself either one, oh, sweet, Munchkin, I remember that, dude. Or two, oh, Munchkin, that game? Man, dude. Regardless of how you feel about the game Munchkin as a whole, one thing that we can all agree on is that it stood the test of time. It became the inspiration for so many young developers that also wanted to make their own card games and helped pave the way for their promotions and so on and so forth. Well, what makes this game so special? Well, for one, it was the first card game I bought when I started getting into collecting board games impulsively. What really makes the game special, at least for its time, is that a lot of card games in that era had a very serious approach to how their game atmosphere was. For example, Magic the Gathering had a very serious atmosphere. It had a huge meta game, it had a huge overall story. Sure, there were some jokes in it, but it wasn't overall using comedy as a force in the game itself. However, Munchkin decides to take this fantasy element of, your classic Magic the Gathering world or your classic D&D world and decides to just sprinkle it all with humor while also providing great game conventions that complement the humor as well as a serious fantasy card game environment. So what's the game all about? Well, to win, you have to reach level 10. And in order to get to level 10, in which you start at level 1 obviously, is you beat monsters, and every time you beat a monster, you gain a level. Some monsters will have multiple levels to give you if you battle them, depending on how high powered they are. And the way you're going to beat monsters is you're going to use your level and compare it to the monster's level, as well as any equipment you have put on. There's equipment bonuses that you will receive through treasure, which will add to your level counter in terms of when you're in combat with a monster. So essentially, you're grinding through a dungeon, defeating monsters, taking their treasure, and getting up a level, while also, at the same time, either helping or screwing over your opponents in order to gain the advantages you need. And that's a big part of the game, is screwing over your opponents, or picking the sides that will work best for you. So what types of classes are out there in the game? Well, everybody starts as a human, either male or female, and it actually just depends on the gender you identify with is the gender you take in the game. At least that's what the main rules show. However, you can bend that to your whim. I don't see a problem with someone being like, you know what, for this game I'm going to be female, whatever. The game has two decks. You have your main deck, which is the door deck, which is, if you're imagining a dungeon, you're breaking down the door, and then that's what you encounter is in that deck, basically, which has classes that you can collect, monsters, obviously, curses, and so on and so forth. The other deck is the treasure deck. The treasure deck is going to have your one-time use spells, and is going to also have your equipment bonuses that you'll need. Each player starts with 4 cards from each deck, to give them kind of a way to start building their character from scratch. It's very luck of the draw, so, the game isn't totally 100% like balanced in terms of luck because, as it's very heavy on the luck aspect of things, to a degree. But once you build your character, you're ready to go. So the way the phases work is you draw a door card, which is, I'm kicking down the door. So you draw the card, and then whatever the card says, it immediately affects you. Unless it's a class card or a utility card of some sort, in which case you can just put it into your hand. But curses will immediately affect you if you draw them on the first draw, and monsters will immediately be in effect when you draw them on the first draw, which means you gotta fight the monster if it appears. If it is a monster, you'll notice the level in the top of the card, which will tell you how tough it is. And all you do, like I mentioned, is you compare your base level plus your damage bonuses that you've had from your treasure cards, and then you compare it to the monster's level. If you're at least 1 higher than the monster, then you win, you beat the monster, you take its treasure, and then you gain 1 level. Or, again, 2 if the monster is offering 2 levels on the card. You can't win ties in combat unless you are a warrior in the game, which is one of the classes you can collect. If you didn't draw a monster and you said drew a curse card, a class card, or whatever, you can instead choose to draw another card from the door deck. Now this card you don't play, it just goes right into your hand just for some extra arsenal. Or, instead of drawing a second card, you can choose to look for trouble by playing a monster from your hand and battling it. This can give you extra bonuses, give you a chance to get a higher level, or what have you. And that's basically the gist of it. You're fighting, you're building up your treasure, and you're just getting to the end faster than your opponent. So what are the classes? Well, essentially there are 2 types of classes. You've got races, and then you've got your character class. So you can have one of each, essentially. So you can have a race, and you can have a character class. So like you can be a human wizard, or you could be an elf wizard, or a halfling warrior, or a dwarf warrior. It's however you see it, it can work for you. And they each have their own special powers and abilities that can help you throughout the game. The class cards, the character class cards, are more in tune to have more abilities because they're just based off of skill, rather than a race, which will have maybe just 1 overall ability, which you can use, of course, to your advantage. And it's usually something that's passive and that kind of is always around. But the character class abilities are interesting because most of them are going to have like a list on the card, which will show you different things you could do during combat, during your opponent's combat, that you can either help or hinder your opponent in some way that will benefit you. It's a game about reading your cards. Essentially, I can't explain all the metagame from it because it's kind of like, it's up to you to decide how you want to play, and you really just have to read the cards to find out what works. There's so many like side rules and sub rules that it's kind of it would be too long to go through everything that the game has to offer. You just really have to play it. You can try and roll to run away. Some potions will give you a plus to a dice roll, or other like cards will give you a plus to a dice roll or something like that. But you can essentially do that. Or you can ask for help. So you can actually ask an opponent to help you in the battle and to combine their strength with yours in order to win. The opponent doesn't have to accept unless you force them through like a means of a card or whatever. And the opponent can also like can generate terms of trade in order to help you out. Like I'll help you for 1 treasure, I'll help you for 2 treasures, or whatever. They can jump in and you can develop a trade with them in some sort of aspect, which is pretty free form. There's really nothing too off limits with that. And then there's curses, which like I said, curses will take effect when you draw them first. But if you have a curse in your hand that you had picked up in either your second draw or you traded hands with someone or whatever, but you can play curses at any time. You don't have to wait for an opponent to finish their turn to get to your turn. You can just play a curse on an opponent at any time, whenever you want, which makes the game very interesting at times. And there are other types of cards in games which can enhance monsters, enhance your character, adding more points to them temporarily, and a lot of aspects that can either be used to screw with other opponents or get you up top to win the game. And that's really the bare bones of it. I'll probably do a video explaining how to play it like in full, but that's kind of Munchkin as a whole. It's a dungeon crawling experience where you're collecting treasure and you're breaking down doors and you're killing monsters while also simultaneously making sure your opponents aren't getting ahead of the game. It's honestly really fun, and I really enjoyed it for like the amount of time that I did play it when I first got it, because I was playing that game like no tomorrow when I first got it. But now it's like, look at that. There's a lot of stuff we could be playing right now, you know. Overall, I think the game lends itself to a very versatile play form and allows for a ton of newcomers to come in and just get immersed in a complex fantasy card game without too much complexity, which I like. However, I would say my issue with the game is that there's a lot of luck of the draw in it. And not to say that it overshadows any strategy, but if you are like, if you're not drawing monsters to battle and grinding while your opponents are, and you're missing those opportunities to get levels, then you're kind of shit out of luck. I mean, there's really, you'll get to a point where they're way high up in levels and you're not, and there's literally nothing you can do. You can't really like pull out of that, and you'll probably just lose the game by default as a result. And so it's kind of like that issue is like, I wish there was some way that you could find a way to grind or to get back up there on the level of your opponents or something like that. I mean, I can't really think of it off the top of my head because obviously it needs to be a fair game rule and it needs to not equate to a handicap of any kind. But it does hinder the game, and it keeps me from wanting to like keep playing it at times because I feel like sometimes it's hard to get the perfect game, and I also just have terrible luck in general. So I tend to get the bad draw with the cards. Regardless, I would highly recommend Munchkin if you're first time into card game collecting or board game collecting or whatever. It's a good piece of board game history in terms of how far we've come since even since Magic the Gathering, but like since the release of this card game. So I would say it's very solid. It's a very solid game, even the cons considered. I think the last thing I should probably mention is their expansions for this game. This game is so highly expanded. Like, there are so many cards, so many different versions of this game that it's impossible to not see anything Munchkin inside a board game store. No matter where you go, you just see at least one Munchkin game and just a bunch of expansions and booster packs just sitting there. And, to be perfectly honest with you, while booster packs are fun and it really adds like new stuff to the game, I would say there's no point. The more cards you add to a game like Munchkin just makes it kind of more confusing and more hard to shuffle. Like, you're going to have like a stack of cards this big, and trust me, I've played with a stack this big. Like, my friend bought like 3 Munchkin expansions, and you can combine them all, even the ones that are reskinned differently, and you put it together, like, and we had a deck this big, okay? We had a deck this big. And why? I mean, there's no point, honestly. The cards in the main set, like the cards in any main set box, it's fine. Sure, it's predictable, but it's not a bad type of predictable. It's not like, oh, here comes this monster. It's more like, I'm expecting these higher level creatures to show up. I'm expecting these lower level creatures to show up. It's like if you're replaying a dungeon in a video game. You go, I know what's coming, and I'm getting ready for that moment when it does show up or whatever. I still think, like, without expansions, the game is fine on its own. I wouldn't bother with buying expansions. There's just too many of them. It's like One Piece in card form. It's like, hey, I'm gonna start reading One Piece, and you're like $2,000 later, and you still haven't finished the set. So anyway, that's all the time I have for today. Thank you for watching this video of Munchkin, and I'll see you guys later, and for more board game content, because we're gonna up the ante. We're gonna do more board game content and just get you guys in the board game spirit, the spirit of board games. Peace out. That was stupid. Ow, Jesus, that was stupid.